We also have a biological that Isaiah talked about when he was talking about probiotics and prebiotics, specifically the prebiotics, a biological that isn't technically considered a plant growth regulator, but more of a soil amendment. And Isaiah, would you cover some more information on our liquid sugar product, the Syntose FA?
Syntose FA falls into a group that we would consider prebiotics. So like you said, that the idea is we're going to be feeding the microbes that are already in the soil rather than introducing a foreign species or a foreign strain. So our Syntose FA product, that contains 3 different forms of sugar as well as fulvic acid. Now, the idea behind giving a sugar, as we all know, sugar is a very calorie-dense food source. The idea behind supplying a very high source of calories is that they're going to take those sugars, break them down, and use them as a source of energy, creating what we consider kind of like a microbial flush or a big flush in population. So those are calories that are going to be feeding the microbes, increasing those populations, and then therefore they're going to be able to break down those residues a little bit quicker and return those residues into something that our plants can use for food, ionic sources of nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium, things like that. So that's going to feed the different bacteria, fungi, as well as different beneficial insects in the soil. I guess I'll kind of start on the bacteria, but those are really those bacillus and trichoderma bacteria species and strains that are responsible for breaking down those residues. We also talk about fungi. Fungi in the soil, they do a lot of different things, but primarily I'd say the most important, other than breakdown of residues that bacteria also do, would be the mycorrhizal association. So those are associations, basically these fungi, they're beneficial in the soil, but they can colonize the roots and increase the root surface area by about 50%. So that's going to increase water uptake, that's going to increase nutrient uptake, as well as those fungi, they're going to excrete organic acids similar to what the roots excrete to help free up a lot of different plant nutrients, specifically those cations like calcium, ammonium, potassium ions, things like that, those cations that are so available to plant growth. So the over time, the long-term benefit that you might be able to see from increasing these microbes is an increase in organic matter and therefore an increase in CEC. So we know that CEC is very important for soil health, and it kind of plays a big role in the soil health. And as a general rule of thumb, a higher CEC indicates a higher holding capacity or a higher storage of nutrients in the soil that are available. Increasing the organic matter by increasing those residues that are broken down can help to increase that organic matter percentage and increase that CEC in turn. Now, CEC is mainly comprised of soil texture, so the ratio of sand, silt, and clay. You can't really change that very much, but over time, especially using products like Syntose and feeding those microbes, can really help to boost up those organic matter levels, marginally raising the CEC possibly. You can also look at the effect on the carbon to nitrogen ratio. So I think the ideal carbon to nitrogen ratio is about 24:1 in the soil. If you have too much carbon there, too much of those things like residues in the soil, unbroken down, that carbon is essentially going to soak in nitrogen like a sponge and basically not allow it to free up for the soil. So if you have too much of that carbon, it can really create a detrimental effect, and that's why we want those microbes and those bacteria in the soil to break those down, break down that carbon. That way it's really not keeping our nitrogen in a form that our plants can't use. So with our Syntose, I mean, it's a very soft chemistry, similar to our PGRs, who really haven't seen any compatibility issues. What we've heard from a lot of our growers is that they'll just add in a pint for every time they spray. The cool thing about Syntose FA is that a pint supplies a pound of sugar. That's kind of the time-tested and proven application rate that farmers have used over several years. What's kind of unique about Syntose FA is that it is a liquid sugar, meaning that rather than using a granular source where you might have to add heat and water to get that dissolved before mixing it to your tank, this is already in an easy-to-use liquid form. You can dump it right into your tank. It dissolves very easily with water, gets into solution very easily with fertilizer, And like I said, because it's a sugar, a very soft chemistry, yet we haven't really heard of any compatibility issues. And another thing about Syntose, because it is a soft chemistry, it's hard to get too much sugars to the soil. You really can't overfeed those microbes. So like I said, if you're going to put a pint of sugar on in every pass, we have guys putting on with their burn down, possibly their starter fertilizer. You can band it with other products, and you could even put it with foliar fertilizer. So it's a very versatile product that allows you to get those sugars out at different timings throughout the season to feed those microbes throughout the entire season. You won't see it on any of our literature or any of our information on our products. We're not going to make those claims there with Syntose FA, but there is a little bit of research that's shown that sugars, when applied to the canopies of things like corn or beans, can actually increase the residence time of beneficial insects and actually reduce the feeding time of negative insects such as aphids. So I think what's happening there, and I think what the research shows, is that some of these insects aren't able to digest some of these complex sources of sugars that are applied with a product like Syntose or other sugars, and won't necessarily be able to feed as well as they might otherwise. Something that's really special about Syntose as well is that it's not just one source of sugar. We have three different sources of sugar: sucrose, fructose, and glucose. So those are three different sources. Two of them are fairly simple, the sucrose and the glucose. Those can kind of be immediately available to a lot of our microbes in the soil, where fructose is a little bit more complex of a sugar, meaning it's got to break down a little bit before it can become available. So that creates a little bit of a slow release type action compared to some other sources of sugar. Let's just say you're using granular sugar. That's really just one source of sugar. So like I said, very easy to handle product. It's something that we've seen very good results with in the past 2 years since it's been on the market with our growers.